On to our next panelist, Dr. Rafal Pankowski. He is a professor at the Institute of Sociology of Collegium Civitas, I think, in Warsaw. He has published widely on racism, nationalism, populism, xenophobia, and other issues, including the books Neo-Fascism in Western Europe, a study in ideology, racism and popular culture, and the populist radical right in Poland, the Patriots. He has served as deputy editor of the Never Again magazine since 1996. I'm using the English translation because I would butcher the Polish name. And he is the co-founder of the Never Again Association. He is also a member of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Pankowski received his master's in political science from the University of Warsaw. He's also studied at the University of Oxford as an undergraduate, and his PhD and habilitation in sociology of culture from the University of Warsaw Institute of Applied Social Sciences. In 2018, he was a visiting professor at the Center for European Studies in Bangkok, Thailand. So without further ado, I will turn it over to him.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Eli. We had a bit of an exchange about pronunciation of Polish-sounding names, and I'm happy to confirm you got it all correct. Thank you. I am really honored to be invited to this panel on behalf of the Never Again Association. We are really happy and honored to be part of the Alliance Against Genocide, which is very important to us. As an organization based in Poland, we started back in the mid-90s. In response to a wave of racist and neo-Nazi violence. And at that time, the name Never Again was kind of obvious to us. We didn't really have to discuss it too much because, of course, for us, the phrase Never Again related to Polish history and the history of the Nazi occupation and the Holocaust. But over the years, of course, we understood that the motto Never Again can and could apply to other contexts, other places, and other countries, and other instances of genocide too. But over the years, we also have had a lot of experiences related to the subject of education on issues related to genocide and genocide prevention. But before I tell you about some of the experiences we had, can I just start by perhaps a provocative statement? Education can be very important and very positive as a part of the solution, but it can also be a part of the problem. And if we talk about formal education, I think it can also often be in many of the countries of the world, it can be a part of a system of manipulation and denial and distortion of knowledge about the different types of genocide and different types of discrimination. And if I can just refer briefly to the current situation in Poland, well, there is a well-known political figure in Poland who just last year became notorious when he said during an interview, LGBT are not people, it is an ideology. And at that moment, the journalist stopped the interview, I think quite rightly, because that was a very obvious instance of dehumanization of a minority. But then on another TV show, he said again, you know, homosexuals are not equal to normal people. Let's stop all this nonsense talk about human rights. Okay. I think that in usual circumstances, you might think that would be the end of his political career. But in the current political climate in Poland, he was rewarded just a few weeks after that with the post of the Minister of Education, including higher education, which I think tells you something about the political climate in Poland, and perhaps also in some other countries in the region. He also has a deputy who just recently staged his one-man demonstration in front of the White House against the Justice for Holocaust Survivors Act of the US Congress, which he thinks means that Jews will claim property in Poland, and that would destroy Poland and the well-being of the Polish people. And those two men that I mentioned are now running the Polish educational system, and very rapidly they are putting their agenda into the curriculum of the Polish educational system. And of course, historically, as we know, you know, some of the fascist and genocidal movements and regimes, you know, they have included people with relatively high levels of formal education. If we talk about the Iron Guard in Romania or the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and of course there are more examples. So what really matters is not just the level of formal education, which is not a recipe, but it is the contents and the format of education that we need to talk about. And well, you know, for a long time, the Never Again Association has been especially interested in the area of informal education. So what happens within the formal educational system is, of course, important, but what is also important, I think, is what happens outside of the formal system. What happens in the area of popular culture, or basically everyday experience, the lived experience, which is you know, which is a form of education in the broadest sense, so to say. You know, now I just want to mention briefly 3 out of many of the different educational activities that that we have conducted over the years. I think number 1 is the music festival, which is known as Poland Rock, but I think it is more known as the Polish Woodstock Festival, which has taken place on the Polish-German border for more than 20 years now. And I'm really happy and proud that our organization, Never Again, has been a big part of that festival for all those years. You know, running workshops, discussions, a football tournament, but I think most importantly, having all the numerous direct interactions with young people at the festival on issues of Holocaust memory, anti-Semitism, racism, discrimination. I think a lot of those conversations have been very important. And I should probably mention this is the biggest such festival anywhere, with about 500,000 people present every year. Last year it was only online for obvious reasons. I very much hope we will be able to participate in it again this year, probably in a slightly different format, but still the festival continues, and it is a kind of tradition that we hope to continue. And just quickly now to other initiatives that I wanted to mention. Together with the Forward Foundation, we created an online collection of lectures about genocide, about the Holocaust, and anti-Semitism and discrimination and related topics for students and teachers, in a way that enabled us to bypass the system of formal education, which, as I mentioned, can be very problematic. But since all education for the last year has been largely online, I think in a way that gave us an opportunity to contribute something in terms of resources that both teachers and students could use outside of the formal system. And the title of this initiative is Ku przestrodze, which you can translate as "watch out" or "warning." And I think this is just one of the examples of the educational activities that has been well received in the last years, in the last period. And finally, last but not least, I want to mention our project, which is supported by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which relates to Poland, but importantly, it also relates to the region of Southeast Asia. The title of the project is, Holocaust Denial and Holocaust Distortion: Lessons for Southeast Asia. And what we are trying to do is we work with educationalists, teachers, students, institutions, media, NGOs in Southeast Asia, and we try to discuss the Polish and East European experience of dealing with the past, addressing the difficult aspects of the Holocaust, and compare it or relate it to the difficult issues of past genocides in Southeast Asia. And now we deal with Cambodia, but also Thailand and also Myanmar. And of course, what has happened in Myanmar in the recent years gives an extra context to this project and to these conversations and these dialogues, but we think that we can learn a lot from each other, and that is also a big part of our educational agenda. And again, when we talk about education, I think it is not about teaching people, but also it is about learning from each other. and this is how we approach this project too. If there are any questions or comments, I will be very happy to address them. But thank you again for inviting me to this panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pankowski. I think that's a very important thing for us to really keep in mind, is that when we talk about education, is not just to focus on the formalized educational processes, but also the informal ones that are constantly around us, constantly affecting everyone in our communities. And that actually brings to mind a question that occurred to me for Dr. Pankowski. When dealing with the more informalized aspects of education, and your previous statements as to how education can actually be used to cause more harm than good when it's in the form of propaganda or damaging statements. I'm wondering if you have any advice as we sort of move into more technology and newer technology standards, which makes having individual voices a lot more open. Because we are seeing a significant rise in conspiracy theorists and statements alluding to genocide denial or any different theory that might be significantly harmful. And I would love to get your opinion, Dr. Pankowski, as well as the other panelists, as to any advice you would have to really try to handle these situations as best we can.
Well, thank you. That's a really thought-provoking question and a really important one. I totally agree with you. I mean, let's start with the first bit, which is maybe just a little easier for me. You know, the relative importance of formal education, which I think several of us already alluded to. Of course, formal education is important, but there are other things that are just as important in the field of education in a broader sense. And you know, I guess all of us can relate to our experiences. I think I went to some good schools, but I think what I learned from a lot in terms of my own, you know, values and outlook on life is listening to music of bands like The Clash. Okay, so I think that is really important, and I think, you know, that may be still ever more important, because I think nowadays especially we see that, you know, the formal education system is, you know, it's not irrelevant, of course, but there are just so many other fields of socialization that are you know, sort of rivaling the formal educational system in its significance. That I think formal education is just one of several, or one of many areas that we should be thinking about. But you know, the second part of your question, which is related, of course, is more tricky. I think when it comes to online resources and online socialization, you know, which, as we know, has been the case for some years now, but it is more topical than ever due to the pandemic. And I think a lot of the repercussions will stay with us in terms of, you know, online interactions and online socialization and online education too. And I think this is a very real challenge also when it comes to our subject, because as we know very well, you know, the social media especially have been very you know, very significant in a negative sense as as a field where disinformation and genocide denial and hate speech is very present. And our organization, the Never Again Association, has monitored this this aspect of social media, especially in the last year or so. And just last year we had a report under the title "The Virus of Hatred," which largely focused on conspiracy theory and hate speech related to the pandemic that is spread on the internet, which of course is a whole is a whole big subject in itself. But I think as a as a civil society community, we are still way we still have a lot of work to do on this field, and especially in the sphere of persuading, or should I say pressurizing, social media companies to feel just a little more responsible for the kind of content that is widely spread online. And as we know, not so long ago, Facebook decided to remove Holocaust denial from its platform. But I think this sort of general decision is still not fully implemented, to put it mildly. So I think there are many aspects of the online reality and the challenges it poses vis-a-vis both genocide commemoration and genocide prevention. And as we have seen in the last years in places like Myanmar, this is real. This is not just about about speech. That has real consequences, and I think it's interesting that some Facebook representatives admitted that they did not react correctly to the hate speech, which actually led to a genocide in the last years in Myanmar. Which I think is a very important admission, but I think it is also a very important testimony to the power of social media when it comes to not just Holocaust and genocide commemoration, but also when it comes to genocide prevention. Thanks.